So, yeah, so I think 7 and 8, Isaiah, we're looking at. I mean, wow, there's so much in there, and I can only pick out just a couple of things. But as a sort of a backdrop, when I told you the story of Terry Ascott and the things that he was facing when God showed him this vision of having TV in the Middle East for, well, Christian TV, I think there was two things that stuck out to me when I've heard his testimony of starting it. Firstly, was the idea was just crazy. It was huge. It was monstrous. At the time, there was no Christian TV there. Satellite was actually still quite new. And he had to have a lot of faith and stubbornness to push it through. The other thing was, when he talked to a lot of the Christian leaders in the Middle East, a lot of them said to him, they said, yeah, it's a good idea, but no Christians are going to want to be seen on TV so openly. It's going to be quite they're not going to want to. So there was a spirit of fear a little bit, that people wouldn't want to do that. And actually, that's what I'd like to bring out from Isaiah tonight, a little bit about fear and faith. So let's see, do we have the first slide, which is a little background to what's going on? I'm sorry, the next slide, it would be. I could see that one back. Okay, so to give you an idea of what was happening at the time of Isaiah. Okay, Middle East there, it was a mess, still a mess today. Anyway, there's always issues, isn't there? So in that time, there was the kingdom of Judah, and then there was the kingdom of Israel, also known as Ephraim, which had broken away about 200 years before, had broken away from the royal family of David. Consequently, they had also broken away from, most of them, from their religion of worshipping God, Yahweh, and their capital was Samaria. And then there was Syria, the other sort of local power to the north, also known as Aram. But in the middle of all this, you've got Assyria. This is now would be northern Iraq, in the city of Nineveh. The Assyrian Empire was starting to grow, and they were starting to expand left, right, and center. And basically, Syria and Israel, if you look, they're right in the path between Assyria and the Mediterranean, and Assyria would have wanted the Mediterranean. They would have wanted that sea. So basically, Aram and Israel, they went into an alliance together to protect their lands against Assyria. And they felt that Judah really ought to join with them. Judah really didn't think it was in their interests. So in this very politically charged atmosphere, the king of Judah, King Uzziah, who actually had had a very long, prosperous reign. Judah was quite a rich country at this point, but people were becoming quite smug and reliant on their riches, quite pleasure-seeking and materialistic. And then, in the middle of all this, King Uzziah dies. And the next thing that happens is Judah hears that Aram and Israel are so mad at them for not joining their alliance that they are going to, basically, they were putting their armies together and they were going to attack Judah and force a regime change and put their own man in power so they could all unite together against Assyria. So this is what's happened. So the next slide is the verses I wanted to share. So this is Isaiah 7, 1 and 2. When Ahaz, son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, was king of Judah, King Rezin of Aram, that's Syria, and Pekah, son of Ramaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem. And now the house of David was told, Aram has allied itself with Ephraim. or Israel. So the hearts of Ahaz and his people were shaken as the trees of the forest are shaken by the wind. People were extremely worried, extremely frightened about this. Then the next verse, the next slide, there we go. So then the Lord said to Isaiah, go out and meet Ahaz, he's the king, right, the king of Judah, at the end of the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field. Now, why did he want him to meet him there? The king was starting to fortify the city against attack. And when you are besieged as a city, the most important thing is to protect your water supply. This was the water supply. So the king was up there organizing the protection of it. God doesn't have any issue with the king doing his best to protect it, but God did have a message for him. He said, be careful. So this is God telling Isaiah, say to him, be careful, keep calm, and don't be afraid. Do not lose heart because of Aram, Ephraim, and Remaliah's son saying, let us invade Judah, let us tear it apart and divide it among ourselves and make the son of Tabeel king over it. Yet this is what the sovereign Lord says. It will not take place. It will not happen if you do not stand firm in your faith. You will not stand at all. Sorry, I've edited the verses down a bit. I've taken bits out, but I'm trying to keep the basic thing there. So it's interesting. So God sort of gives him two instructions. It's fascinating. He says, it's not going to happen. They're not going to do it. And yet, I'm telling you, do not lose your faith. Don't be scared. Don't be frightened. Because if you don't stand firm in your faith, you won't stand as a country. And God is also telling them, look, maybe Israel's doing this. Maybe Syria's doing this. But you are God's people. And as God's people, it's different. And you need to be trusting God. It reminds me a little bit, this thing, because you'd say, so why is it important that they have faith when God said it's not going to happen? It reminds me a little bit of, remember when St. Paul was on the boat, on the shipwreck, and then he came, there'd been shipwrecked for 3 weeks, wasn't it, or something, and Paul came down and says, don't worry, everybody, I saw an angel last night. Guess what he said? The angel said, no one's going to be lost. We're all going to make it to safety. And then a bit later, the sailors, if you remember the story, they start taking down the lifeboats, and they're going to scoot and leave everybody on the boat. And Paul runs to the centurion and says, if those guys take the safe, if we lose the sailors now, we're all going to be lost. So what was this? It's interesting. It's sort of a tension, isn't it? Paul was quite convinced they'd all be saved, but at the same time, he said he had a job to do. He had to tell the centurion, stop those guys doing that, or we're all going to be lost. And this is an interesting thing. God is saying, it's not going to happen, but if you don't stand firm in your faith, you will not stand firm at all. So the next slide has a question. I'm afraid, because I ran over on the other one, I don't really have time, we don't have time to discuss it, but it's something to think about. The people of Judah had heard some very frightening news. What sort of news today could make you that fearful? And God, through Isaiah, told them not to fear. How do you think they would be able to do that? It's okay for God to say, don't be frightened. But goodness me, you've got this whole enemy army at the gate. Interesting question. So if we go to the next slide, so that was part of it. We should not fear. We're God's people. And when there's difficulties, God is going to see us through. And we need to trust him. But then the story, it takes an interesting turn. I think God saw, it's very obvious that King Ahaz didn't have a lot of faith. The people didn't have a lot of faith. And they needed a bit of help to be able to actually trust. They were supposed to trust, not be afraid. So God says, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, I guess through Isaiah, and said, Ahaz, ask the Lord your God for a sign, whether in the deepest depths or in the highest heights. I'll give you a sign. You're having a hard time believing I'm going to protect you. Ask for a sign. Anything. As deep, actually the word is Sheol, as deep as hell or as high as heaven, you ask. And what did Ahaz say? I will not ask. I will not put the Lord to the test. Have you ever been so religiously correct that you have said no to God when he's giving you an idea, when God is saying, hey, you can do this. Have the faith for it. You get an idea. And this is what I'm tying in a little bit with Terry and his idea. A great idea, but it happens to all of us all the time. God is putting things on our hearts. And what do we say? Do we say, oh, no, I'm too humble for that. I can't do that. Or do we actually take the challenge? It's quite disappointing, really. So Ahaz just said, he was very religiously correct, too. He actually quoted, you shall not put the Lord thy God to the test. No, I won't do that. But that's not a good thing to do if God's telling you to reach out by faith and think big. So then Isaiah said, hear now, you house of David, is it not enough to try the patience of humans? Will you try the patience of my God also? So I guess the last slide I wanted to share here now is, if God challenges, I said you, us, all of us, when God challenges us to step out by faith and to trust God to do something huge or to pray for something really big, what's our response? What is our response going to be? Are we going to hide behind some sort of a religiously correct cowardice? Or do we have the faith to say, yes, I'm willing to pray for something really big? A couple of thoughts. Anyway, there's so much in those 2 chapters, and we've just skimmed the surface of a couple of the points. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for hearing about the ministry, and thank you for sharing fellowship. God bless you.